Thank you, Minister, for a very nice speech. I think we are going to focus a lot on the Arctic Council in this session here. I think you are actually in a very, very important role in the states of affairs in the world today to chair the Arctic Council. So it must be a very exciting challenge there. But you talked about the cooperation in the Arctic. How good is it? We remember the ministerial meeting in Rovaniemi this May. And it happened to be the first meeting where the ministers, the foreign ministers of the 8 Arctic states could not agree upon a substantive declaration as they've done every time before. So I think it's essential to ask you, is the cooperation spirit in the Arctic Council as good as you thought when you, or before you took over the chair?
Well, thank you. It's a good question, and a lot has been made out of that we didn't have a full-fledged, you could say, declaration. But we have to bear in mind that this is for the second time in the 23 years of the Arctic Council that all of the ministers, all of the 8 ministers were there. And there is no doubt in my mind that the interests have never been higher when it comes to the work in the Arctic Council. And also in Rovaniemi, even though, and that's, I could say, natural, then a lot was made of things that we did mention. Then there was a ministerial statement which reaffirmed the principles of the Arctic Council. And also, we got a total support for our principles, and also a guideline for the work in the working groups. And we shouldn't underestimate the core of the work in the Arctic Council, which are the working groups, because that work is extremely important. It is simply that we are gathering information and data which we can use in our policy. And that's the only way to make a good policy, that if you have the best information and data. But at the same time, when you have not only people in the Arctic, but also people outside the Arctic working together in those groups, it couldn't be underestimated. So far, so good, but of course we know the challenges are there, and but we gladly take on the responsibility.
Yeah, many people believe that the Arctic Council cooperation is a model of, or is an example of excellent cooperation. As you mentioned there, the working group, the science. But the cooperation has managed to keep the area which used to be the scene for the Cold War, peaceful and stable for 23 years. Yes, we even heard that this work has come to the Nobel Prize Committee. Didn't happen today, but maybe in the future. How do you see what are the strengths in the Arctic Council?
Well, I think that, and this is something that we are very familiar with in Iceland. I think that if you're going to have a good policy, if you're going to make a decision, it's a good one, then you need to have the best knowledge possible. We have done it both ways. And then I'm referring for our fishing. Well, if you make a decision on quotas based on the wrong analysis and not based on scientific methods, you will run into problems, and nature will run into problems very quickly. But what we do have in the Arctic Council, we have these 6 working groups, because you have people from all the Arctic countries, also outside the Arctic countries, and we are gathering the best data possible. And that is something that then we discuss it both at ministerial meetings, but also we shouldn't underestimate, and that's even more important, that you have the permanent participants, the people that live in the Arctic, especially the indigenous people. And I think this is a good example of how a good international cooperation should be.
We sometimes hear that the Arctic region is badly regulated, or even it's a legal gap there, and so the danger is there that activities that are unregulated there could seriously harm the environment in the Arctic and sort of work against sustainable development. What is your view of that?
Well, actually, we often hear that, but we have to remember that every part of the land in the Arctic is a part of a sovereign state. And when it comes to the high seas, it's not unregulated. It's actually, we have the United Nations law of the sea, which is both within the 200 miles economic zone and definitely outside it. So, and I think it also was an extremely good thing that we have just signed an international agreement on unregulated fishing. I think the challenges are twofold. First, it's good governance. The system is there. But of course, we have examples of international law is not enforced. And that is the challenge. We need to see that the regulation and the law, they are fulfilled. If that happens, then we don't need to worry that much on that part. And then the second part is that with more activities in the Arctic, and there is quite a lot now, then it's important that we have some search and rescue capabilities. And there we need infrastructure.
You mentioned in your speech the observers. Now we have 40 observers in the Arctic Council. How do you see them sort of help to strengthen the Arctic Council?
To have so many observers is an indicator of the respect for the Arctic Council. And I think it's extremely important to have the observers there. I often say that the Arctic is the opposite of Las Vegas. What happens in the Arctic, it will not stay there. It will definitely affect all of us, even far, far away. So that we have nations far away from the Arctic, which is interested in our observers in the Arctic, is the strength, it's not a weakness. And for example, when we're talking about the working groups, we need all the knowledge that we can have, the best knowledge, the best practices, and the observers are strengthening the Arctic councils.
I believe that sort of the strength of the Arctic Council is this dialogue, this close dialogue that you have between science on one hand and policymakers on the other hand. I don't think you will find any other organization where there's so close, it's closeness between scientists and ministers. So I think that is something that is really good. What is? Do you have any views on that? Is that?
No, I just agree, and I think that when we talk about the Arctic Council, then we should also bear in mind what would the situation be like if we wouldn't have the Arctic Council, if we wouldn't have the working groups. Yeah. I think that we were then shouting out we needed something like the Arctic Council. And I think, and I hope that there are total consensus about that the decision, the policy, which we're going to have in the Arctic should be based on the best knowledge. Mm-hmm. And I always ask if someone has any doubts, if you're going to make a decision and you don't have the best knowledge, how are you going to base your decision on?
Yes, I think that's, our time is up now, and I think that's a good way to end our discussions. Let's give the Minister a good applause and wish him well in his very, very important task of leading the Arctic Council.